the essence with those attendees who are present. And we are looking at the home tab of our InstanetForms only account. And like I said, all we have access to in this type of account is the forms library. We don't have access to DocBox, document management, task management, and those other features that are available through other account types. So first thing, let's just quickly take a look at a transaction, make sure we're all familiar with the concept of an online transaction file. And then we're going to go to the Settings tab, and we're going to generate a Quickstart group. And then we're going to create a transaction template and a clause. And then we'll see how to start our files and use this content through that setup process. So let's just click on this top one just to reiterate that yes, you can come back to your online transaction files, that you can re-access these files, clicking on the file name to launch that file, use that file to manage the sale process, type up those contracts, create form packets, deliver those form packets outbound. So I'm going to grab this MLS ID so we can show that import feature as well. So you can see the features of our online transaction. We are in the overview screen. This dashboard on the left, I refer to this column of red bullet points on the left-hand side of the screen as the dashboard. All of these links are elements, if you will, of our transaction. We're looking at the overview page, but there's dates and history and general information. The name and status of your file can be updated in the general information, property information, address, city, state, zip, legal description, purchase or list price and that content, call logs to log substantive conversations, to type notes or leave comments and updates on that transaction file, contacts and participant access, forms and sharing. So these are all features of our transaction files. And most people might start a new file and just go through and manually add all of that content to their new transaction. So what we're going to do now is from our transaction file, follow my mouse to the top right hand corner, that top row of tabs. We're going to click on Settings, and we're going to generate some account content through the Settings tab. Clicking on Settings, we can see these features within our online account. Center aisle, Quickstart groups, templates, top right corner, clauses, bottom left hand corner, branding. You can add your personal photo, your company logo to your account to brand outbound email messages, to brand participant websites. You can add this content to your file, to your transaction desk, to your transaction files, your InstanetForms account, to brand those items, that outbound correspondence. First thing that we're going to focus on, top center, Quickstart groups. Be able to create groups of forms and contracts, clicking here on Continue, so that you don't have to go through and hunt and peck and find one at a time. You can create these groups of forms and contracts to quickly add multiple packets to your transaction file. So what's a disclosure packet Quickstart group? Clicking on that one, top of the list, we'll see what forms or contracts are associated with this Quickstart group. So give it a name. You really can choose if you want to automatically associate this group of forms to a particular transaction type. Search from the available forms. Add those forms to this Quickstart group. So this groups together this set of forms and contracts. So when you have these sales situations, you can quickly add that group of forms to your existing transaction file. I'm a bigger proponent of transaction templates, so I don't necessarily always automatically add Quickstart groups to files, but I like to have them set up so that I can quickly add a subset of forms as they become required through that sale process. So just a personal preference on how to set them up. You certainly can attach them to particular transaction types, or you create the Quickstart group and then manually add that group of forms to your transaction. So back to the Settings tab here. Our list of Quickstart groups, there's that similar phrase again, I would like to. It's a very consistent phrase throughout Transaction Desk. There it is again, I would like to. That phrase is always in association with that drop-down triangle. Clicking on that triangle yields that list of values or menu option. So we're sticking with the Create New Quickstart Group and going to click on the Go arrow. Because the first thing we do is give our Quickstart group a name. And I had a big list there, so I might have to generate a duplicate here. But again, just something that's going to help you identify this group of forms. We'll just call this one the HOA, that mandatory HOA. Mandatory HOA forms. Because in this instance, where the property or listing that you have is in a mandatory homeowners association, you can identify the forms that you would need in that sales situation. Do you want to automatically include this to a particular transaction type? You certainly can, but it's not required. As I'm going to continue to emphasize, I'm a bigger proponent of transaction templates to start the file from the template. And if we have these additional forms, we can add them to that existing file. So your preference, you choose which you prefer, but just give it a name. That's the only requirement here, is to name this Quickstart group. Bottom right corner, we're going to save the Quickstart group. Because now we're going to add the Quickstart group items. We're going to add the forms to this Quickstart group. So individual, let's see, all forms, buyer forms, conventional purchase, lease, listing. So let's see if we can find it in the listing forms. Right to sell, lead-based paint, multifamily, disclosure, conditions, MLS, single families. Maybe we should look under all forms. Maybe this is just in Austin, Texas here, and this is, I believe, every new home that's built is in a mandatory homeowners association. But just to not spend too much time trying to find particular forms, add the form that would be this type. So let's just go to the addendum, because it would be an addendum maybe to the listing agreement is the homeowners association. So it would be that one. We can select multiple from the list by pressing and holding the Control key on our keyboard, the CTRL key on our keyboard. Just go to the property information. We'll select that additional CTRL key on the keyboard, select it. Any others that we would need to add here? Well, let's just grab one more just to show that step again. Press and hold the CTRL key on your keyboard to select the additional form. So go through, identify the forms that you want to group together. Group them together by adding the forms to this Quickstart group. Add selected forms. Clicking that button is going to now add them to the list there on the right-hand side of the screen. And we can see those forms that we've added. So when we choose that mandatory HOA Quickstart group, these 3 forms will be added to our transaction file. There is a menu there, I would like to. You can remove them, revise them, add to them, take appropriate steps to keep this Quickstart group up to date. Bottom right-hand side of the screen, save the Quickstart group. So really it's just that. Give the Quickstart group a name, save it, and then import those forms into that Quickstart group. So when you create that Quickstart group, you're identifying forms that you want to add together. You group them together so that you can add them together to your transaction files. So that's a Quickstart group, groups of forms to identify and then add to your transactions. Back to the Settings tab. Because I'm just a bigger proponent of templates. The templates actually allow you to define more information on your transactions. It really allows you to template the entire file. So center of the screen, transaction templates. To me, this is the better of the options. Quickstart groups are good, in my opinion, to add to existing files when those groups of forms become required. The templates really give you the opportunity to identify all the core features of those transactions. So let's just look at the buyer template first, just so you can see how similar it is to a transaction file. It really is a transaction file that you are going to use to start new files. You can add the forms. You can add contacts. You can add this content to your transaction template. Start your file from the template to automatically include this content. So again, just showing the similarities between the template and the transaction file. Backing up, let's start a new one. I would like to create a new transaction template. I'm going to click here on the Go arrow. Even the start page is about exactly the same as when you're starting a new transaction. So let's do the, give it a name. We're going to call this the Single Family Residential Listing Template. Again, it is the free-form text. You type the name that's going to help you identify it. So when you see that template, you're like, yes, that's the template I use to start this type of, or populate this type of new transaction. So we can attach it to a particular transaction type. Excuse me. Now it's not required, but I do like to attach it to a particular type of transaction. Now, I'm not going to import from the MLS because we don't want to give it a lot of specific information. We're going to try to keep these as generic as possible for all of our single-family residential listings because you want to be able to use it every time you have that one. Thank you. We are going to use the wizard, and I'm not going to identify myself here on the template either. I'm going to click on neither there. Neither, neither. I'm going to choose that feature. I'm not going to add myself to the template. I'm going to identify myself on the transaction file. And I'm going to click here on Add Template. Because if I add myself now, I've run into the most likely scenario that I'm going to duplicate myself each time I start a new file. Because I'll be added in from the template, and then I'll add myself again into the transaction. So I'm trying to eliminate the opportunity to duplicate myself as a contact in transaction. So if you add it to your template, then do not add it to your file. That's why I choose not to add it to my template. I'll identify myself when I'm starting my new transaction file. You know, the inverse logic there. But property information. What information do we have? Probably not much, quite honestly, because any information we add here will be automatically included in our new transaction. We'll import property information into our transaction file, or we'll manually add. You may benefit here if you do not benefit from an MLS import feature. If you don't have that integration within your account, maybe you would add the city that you typically work in. For me, I could add Austin, Texas, and 9 times out of 10, that's where I would, these properties would be listed or purchased in Austin. So I could add that information, but really not a ton of property information because, again, we're going to add this content to our file, not to our template, but to our file. I'm going to click on Next, skipping that step. I would like to add a new transaction contact. Now here's where we can kind of have a lively discussion of whether or not it would be of value to add a contact type to your template. I am a proponent of adding a type of contact here because you wouldn't be starting a new file unless you had a client or prospect or customer who's interested in utilizing your services. So it can be of value. If you think about the template as just reducing steps when starting a new file, this can reduce steps. I would like to add new transaction contact, click on the Go arrow. What type of contact? Well, we're creating a listing template, so we wouldn't really be starting a file unless we had a seller in mind. Now, we don't know who they are now, and I appreciate that. I'm going to choose seller, contact type, and click on Continue. So who am I going to add here? I'm going to add placeholder, or you can add default seller, or some just language that's going to be very generic. It's not a particular person. We're merely adding this contact type, and that's all I'm going to add. Placeholder, and click on Save Contact Information in the lower right corner. Because it's going to be easier for me to just update that placeholder than it is to go through the steps to add the contact type. And we'll see it as we start a file. Hopefully it will make more sense when we start our file. But here's where you can, and maybe when you have new listings, you work with or try to work with the same title officer over and over again, or the same closing attorney routinely. You could add those folks that you routinely work with to your template. So if you're in those areas or situations where you have that capability of selecting title companies or closing attorneys, you could add them here. If you routinely work with the same person or group, you can add them here. Anything that's kind of customary within your files, you can identify within your templates. So I'm just going to add one seller because that's who I know I'm going to have each time I start a new listing file. And I'm going to click on the next button to go to the next step. Looks like two forms. This is what happens when Quickstart groups are automatically associated with a transaction type. I chose residential listing, and this Quickstart group was added to my file, my template here, which is fine. Most likely, if you're following along or when you go through to set this up for the first time, yours is going to come back with none here, no forms added in. So you might have none, which is fine as well, because I would like to add new forms. Click on the go arrow. You want to add the forms. You want to identify the forms, because when I say single family residential listing, through your mind now you're popping all the forms that you customarily use for that type of transaction or that type of client. Listing agreement, seller's disclosures, agency, relationship disclosures, all of those forms that you would require. So you can see we can choose from our Quickstart groups. Here's our list of Quickstart groups, so it seems like one of these packets was added in. Now, one thing I haven't really spoken to is there are options for sponsoring brokers, office managers to generate this content as well. And that's what I'm seeing. When I started my file from the listing, I basically had a Quickstart group added. So my broker said, when you start a new residential listing file, these are the two forms I want to have added each time. So this type of contact can be added from that broker level as well, that office level. But as you create Quickstart groups, you will see them here in this list. So I'm going to add a few more forms from the individual form library. Let's just go to listing forms, and because we'll probably add, I think there's one, the exclusive right was on there added. So let's just add a few more. I'm going to add that input sheet. Right, let's see, that's apartment, commercial, multifamily. Here's a disclosure that we'll want to add. Press and hold the CTRL key. Select that one. Let's do the property condition. Press and hold. Select that one. Single family residential. Press and hold the CTRL key and select that additional form. So make sure I don't have duplicates. So I selected 3 more forms, and I'm going to add the selected forms to this transaction template. So that should be a decent round of forms that I know I'll use every time. And I am a minimalist. I will admit it here and now that I am a minimalist. I only want to add, personally, I only want to add the forms I know I'll need. I'll go back and add more forms as they become required. Some of you are on the exact opposite side of that bell curve, where you're going to want to add any one that you could potentially use and then either ignore or delete the ones that you won't use for that particular client. So I am a minimalist, so that's why I only have 5. You may choose to add any addendums or amendments or provisions or all those forms that you could potentially use, and then either ignore or delete the ones you won't. I'm the other side. I only like to add the ones I know I'll need, and then I'll add more as they become required. And that's it. So that's setting up a template. Not quite yet. So I'm going to go to save and exit. We've completed the steps. We're going to save and exit from this setup wizard, because that's good. That is a nice setup, right? Because then you feel pretty good about that. I mean, yeah, that's a good way to get started. It'll save me the time, energy, effort, have to go through and find those every time, and that seems like a pretty good start. We can go even further. So I'm going to click here now on the template. I'm going to reopen it now. I'm going to click on that listing template, because not only do I want to add the forms themselves, but I want to pre-fill these forms with customary field data. What is that fancy talk for? It's pre-filling your forms. I'm going to click here on the exclusive right to sell contract, clicking on that form name to launch the form in Forms Editor. Because this is why I like the templates. I prefer the templates over the Quickstart groups. Yes, the Quickstart groups will add the forms. The templates allow me to add the forms and pre-fill the forms with customary form detail. I understand that every client is different. I understand that every aspect of every contract is negotiable, but I feel confident that there are fields within this listing agreement that are going to routinely be the same. Those are the fields that I feel that we can go and pre-fill. So here's the list of forms that we've added on the right-hand column. The top of that right-hand column, I'm going to click on that minus sign to shrink that window against the right-hand side of the screen, and let's go through. Now, this information here, property address, owner address, broker, phone, this is going to be transaction file specific, so I'm not going to add it in now. Exclusive right, the terms, don't know it. I'll add it in to my file. What I want to find is the fields, like here. Owner authorizes or does not authorize third parties to write comments or reviews about their property, hyperlinks to comments. I'm going to say that they do authorize that. Automated estimate of market value, hyperlink estimated. Why not? I'm going to add that one as well. Because customarily the owner is going to allow me to do my job. I know it doesn't happen all the time where the owner wants to do your job for you or feels like they can do it better than you, but most of the time you're going to work with sellers that they're going to give you that freedom. Okay, what about this checkbox? It's A or B. Broker does not want the address on the internet. That's always a tough one. Let me go with does not want it. We're going to get the photo on there, but maybe not necessarily want the exact address location. What's really nice about here, and as we'll see when we start our file, we're merely setting guidelines for ourselves. These can be changed within the actual transaction file, which I'll be sure to highlight as we start our file from this template. Specific number of days after expiration, let's go with 90 days. You might like 120. You might like 180. Again, one of those features, those protection periods, that is just kind of customary on your forms and contracts. Another fee that maybe is customary here in Austin, Texas, it might be 5 now, but it's 6, 5. It's a negotiable, but we can feel good with that. And then we offer 3 to the buyer's agent, something like that. Again, if it changes on my file, I can change it. Sub-agency, try not to deal with sub-agency too much, so we give them about 1/3 of that. Brokerage agency will get the full 3. So they need to represent the buyer. They cannot be a sub-agent. I'm not really familiar with these too much, but we'll split the difference. Yeah, listing broker only. And again, these contracts may look as foreign to you as they do to me, right? This is a nationally broadcast webinar. I'm using a library out of Syracuse, New York. So unless you're a Syracuse, New York agent, these forms don't look familiar to you. But you know these similar fields within your forms, and you know which ones you could pre-fill, and they would be pretty customary each time. You know the ones that you would feel comfortable adding some content to. Owner acknowledges that. Anything there? Potential buyers now. All right. And again, this content, owner's name, broker's name, I don't need to type in that stuff now, especially for broker or my information, because that is going to come in from my transaction file. So just like Forms Editor, let me expand the column here on the right, middle, kind of shading to the top side of the screen there, that plus sign. Just to always point out that if we go to the next form without saving the changes we made to this one, we will be prompted to save. So I clicked on there, the residential MLS data sheet. So I'm going to save my changes. Of course I do. You can go through each form that you have attached to this template and pre-fill that form with any customary information, whatever you would feel confident about adding in and saving yourself having to type that form detail in when you're creating your transaction file. That's really the value here, is being able to just pre-fill fields that you would feel comfortable with, adding the content now, because you know 9 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10, it's going to be the same. And same with here. Lots of fillable fields here. We'll say existing and existing unknown. Sure, why not? That sounds like an interesting, I guess it can only be one, so let's use that one. Again, shrink that column with the red minus sign so we can see it. And I don't want to spend too much more time here. I know we're creeping up on the top of the hour, about 15 minutes to go, but again, if you have these type of input sheets, you could certainly go through and add features like this one here. It's going to routinely be, or at least for me, it would be that, and actually I guess it would be that one, something like that. Lockbox, owner occupied, call first, something like that. Go through your form fields, add that content, save your changes. Here's how you save it. Top left corner, you can hit the Save Diskette or File Save. So save the changes that you make. Create this content. Exiting from the form editor. Okay? Now just keep in mind, don't be nervous about pre-filling, because if it changes on your transaction file for your client specific, you can update it within your transaction file. You're just creating guidelines. They're not locked in. Those content that I just added, not locked into the form. When I'm working in my transaction file, I can update it for that particular client or property. So this is just to give me a leg up. If the leg up holds, I'm better off. If I need to update it within my file, I can do that as well. All right, last piece of content before we go to start our new file. Back to the Settings tab. Content, clauses. Top right-hand corner of the screen, clauses, clicking on Continue, because you can generate this type of content for your account as well. You can see we have a few that we've created here. Give the clause a name and contents, and we're going to save it to our list here. I would like to, there's that phrase again, add new clause. You may have these clauses already. Maybe you have them in a Word document that you paste from. You could certainly continue to do so. And we'll call it the Make Ready clause. And again, just give the title so you see it, you recognize it, you know in the particular situation where you're going to add it in. And it's going to be the language used when requesting professional cleaning services prior to closing and funding. Something like that. You know your content. You know your clause that you want to add. Type it in. Save it. Here at the bottom, save the clause. Give your clause a title. Give your clause contents. Save your clause. There are no restrictions from pasting in there. Looks like I doubled up that Make Ready clause, but those are just the steps. Give it a title. Give it content. Save the clause. We'll be able to access these clauses through our Forms edit mode so that we can paste them into our forms and contracts. No redundant data entry, no typing that same clause over and over and over again and slightly changing it each time because that one word is different, or because you can't remember it the same every time. This is the way to remember it the same way every time. Type it once, and then we'll see how we can paste it into our forms and contracts. So, all right. That's content, so that's the Settings tab. Again, back to Settings tab, final look there. Sharing, much the same. If you have a group or a person that you want to share your files with, you can give the share a name, choose the people or person, add them in to create that share. This is where you can create that content for your InstanetForms account. Now we're going to go to Transactions. Center of the screen, second row of links there, Transactions. We're going to start a new transaction file. Clicking on Transactions, here's all the ones that we've created previously. I would like to, there's that phrase again, create new transaction, click on the Go arrow. Clicking on the Go arrow, we are going to come to this Start page. Now here's the difference. Here's where you need to here's where you need to select a different option. So right now, the little blue button is by new transaction. The little blue button there. What we want to do is basically put that little blue button here into the populate from a transaction template. By clicking in that circle, click, we see now the little blue button is there by populate from a transaction template. So we're starting our new file by populating it from the template. So what is our file name? And again, I just use the client's last name here. Let's go with Nick Nickerson, and he's a single-family residential listing prospect. Something like that. And here's our list of templates. So as you create more and more templates, your list will get longer and longer. So I'm going to choose that listing template. And here is where I want to identify myself as a contact. Remember, when we created the template, I kept saying choose neither, because I'm going to identify myself now as the listing agent. But maybe I'm neither or both. So maybe I'm both. Maybe I'm going to be in that situation. But anyway, choose the appropriate side of the file here so you can be added, your broker can be added to that transaction. And start our new transaction. Clicking on Start Transaction, we're going to start our new file. I'm not going to add too much content here to the first page, the property information, because I am going to import that content into our new file here from the MLS. But again, if you don't benefit from that MLS integration, you want to go ahead and type in that property information. Build your file detail to autofill. So now you can see we're building again. We're building our detail. A lot of detail just came in from our template. So now we're going to build the client or property specific information into our new file. So property information, I'm going to leave it blank because some of it's going to import from my MLS anyway. But type it in. There are no required fields, but add the content that you would benefit from. You add your details so that they will autofill the forms and contracts. Clicking on Next. Some dates. Do you have the dates? Do you know what they are yet? If you're completing the listing agreement, you certainly can add them in. If you're kind of going to go meet with the client to determine what those dates are, you can certainly fill them in at the table or take those appropriate steps to get the dates added in. Again, just clicking through here. Here is our listing broker's been added. I've been adding it as a listing agent. So I'm just clicking Next just to highlight that there are no required fields. But here's why I added the seller placeholder. See, seller contact placeholder. I just click on the placeholder name. And that's going to allow me to update placeholder with Nick Nickerson. Something like that. Do I know his information? Let's add a cell phone and email address. Something like that. Do we want to grant Nick access to our transaction file, giving him, it's kind of building better transactions. So let's click here just to show it, just for 2 seconds, scroll through. You give them a login name and a password because InstanetForms is going to generate a participant website. InstanetForms will generate that website. You give them a login name and a password to access that website. You choose if you want notifications, if you want to set an expiration date. You set these features for this website. Then you choose specifically the features that you want them to have access to. Property information, dates, forms. You can even allow your participant to fill out the form online. So if you want them to go online and add in that list date and that expiration date, you could give them fillable access to your online form. This is generating that participant website. So you can select the specific features that you want them to have access to. If you just want them to have access to one form so they can have that disclosure, you just want to give them access to that one disclosure form so they can print it out, you could certainly just give them access to that one form. So you can choose to offer participant access to any contact that you add to your transaction file. Do you have to? No. But it's there, and it's a way to get folks participating in your online transaction file. probably the first time we met with Nick or talked with Nick, so we can add him to our contact database. If we had worked with him previously, we can insert him top right corner. We can insert him from our contacts. Save our contact information, because two things happen when I click here on Save. One, he's added to my transaction file. Two, he's saved to my contact database. If there's additional sellers, I would add them in as separate contacts. I know I'm going to have one, that's why I added the placeholder for them. If there's more, I add them in separately so that each seller will autofill those fields in my forms. Speaking of forms, clicking on the Next button there, here are the forms that we added in from our template. Can I add more? Can I access my forms library? Sure. I would like to add new forms. Click on the Go arrow. Because maybe we do want to add that Quickstart group for the Mandatory Homeowners Association, or we want to add that Quickstart group of disclosures or lead-based paint. We created it, so let me just use it. Mandatory HOA. Nick told me that his house is located in a mandatory homeowners. Can I access all the individual forms to add more? Sure, I can. Hopefully you've seen that a few times and feel comfortable adding those individual forms. Add selected forms to the transaction. So instead of having to hunt and peck to find the 3 or 4 that are associated with the mandatory, I grouped them together in a Quickstart group. Now they've added them in. Looks like I had one duplicate there. So we select the duplicate. I would like to drop down arrow, delete that selected form, click on Go. That's okay with me. I have my full list. At any time we're going to be able to come back and add more as they become required, but that's a good list of forms now. Clicking on Next. Here's where I can share it. If I created that share group, I have access here and now to add that share group. Just because I created the share does not mean that I have to use it. I don't have to share if it's not a file that I want to share with that individual or group of people. So I can create it and then determine exactly when I want to share my files. Clicking on the Save and Exit, we've completed the wizard to start our new file, and we've come to the transaction overview. Pause my screen here just for a moment because in my earnestness to show copying and pasting, I lost that MLS ID. So I'm going to grab that one again, and we'll use it now to import into our existing file. So I do think that this is a good step, that even with a listing, I think that there's more opportunity than you might think to be able to import listing data into a transaction file. So from our overview screen, hopefully this screen is becoming more and more familiar as we see it more and more often, but overview screen, I would like to phrase, there's that phrase again, drop down arrow, import data. Selecting that action and clicking on the Go arrow, I can now import from the MLS. And again, I choose my provider, I choose the appropriate property type, I paste in or type, you can certainly type as well, and import. And in this case, cross our fingers to that MLS ID is still active, pending, withdrawn, expired, that it still has some validity to it. So looks like it does. That content's been imported in, and that's why I didn't type any property information, because there it is, address, city, state, zip, some list price came in, we'll just stick with that. I use the content from the MLS to auto-complete my form fields. So let's go to those forms now. Clicking, always work from the dashboard on the left, InstanetForms, second from the bottom there of the dashboard. Clicking on that, auto-populate update forms. Just get in the habit of doing it. Each time you want to go in, anytime you've made updates or revisions to your transaction file detail, update or auto-populate your forms with that, with those changes. Because that's, you build your transaction file detail to autofill your form fields. That's the way the data travels from your transaction file to your forms. We get the on-screen confirmation that the forms are successfully updated. And now I'm going to click on that exclusive right to sell to open that form in Forms Edit mode. so that we can go through now and complete all of the required and optional fields. Here's the list of forms that we have. Again, there's in the list here on the right-hand column. I'm just going to click on that red minus sign to shrink it. Address has been added in. Owner's been added in. Broker, listing agent, phone numbers, the content that I added to my transaction. If I had added more content, more would be imported. Broker, list price, list date. We could add the other, well, maybe we'll put, I know it's probably not legal to do that, but this is not a legally binding contract, so we'll just put to be determined. All of the blue fields are fillable. They accept both letters and numbers, alpha and numeric, so you can add that content to your file. Scrolling down, we want to fill all our fillable fields, but here's now value. There's the property is completed. There's my owner. You know what? He said that he did not authorize the automated estimate market value online. I can change it. So there's the value. I added the content to my template so it's automatically added. I can update it as required on my transaction file. Doesn't affect my template at all. My template's done. It started the file from the template. Template's no longer affected. It's not affected at all by the changes I make to these forms. These forms are now specifically for this client and property. So scrolling down, make sure all my fillable fields, there's my protection period. Scrolling down, there's all my fees and commissions and so forth. Scrolling down, check boxes. So all I'm really doing now is just verifying that it's done. All my fields here. And if I had added the broker's name to my office, then his name or her name would fill there. So again, just verifying that all this content. So how much have I really typed to this point? Not much, because it's all been either pre-filled from my transaction file, pre-filled from my template, or auto-filled from my file. One thing I was looking for, and maybe I just cruised past it, was more of a provision field where I could show you how to access those clauses and paste them into the form field. So let me do another backup here to see if I did just cruise on past it without paying it much mind. Doesn't look like it. So let's go from this form, clicking on that plus sign to expand it, and let's just go to contract addendum. Again, clicking here to go to the next form. I didn't save my changes, but I will be prompted to do so. So not that anyone ever forgets to paste, but in those instances you can. All right, clicking on yes, and we're creeping right up on that quarter past 45-minute mark. Just want to show you the final clause that we created. Activate the field where you want to paste it. You see I clicked into the big open text field. My cursor is blinking there in the top right. I know my left from my right. I'm going to be dangerous. Top left corner, you see it blinking there. Insert from the top of my forms editor. Insert clauses. Selecting that action. Here are all the clauses that we've generated. There's the make ready clause. Select it. See the contents. Add it to selected. Somebody like Santa Claus. Select it. And see the contents. Add it in. Here's it's a nice feature to be able to add multiple clauses, and then click here to copy to form. By clicking copy to form, it's going to first ask at the top of the input area, which is just kind of fancy talk for pasting it to the top left indent. The answer there is yes, and that content is pasted in. Create your content, use that content to reduce time, energy, and effort, increase consistency and efficiency. Save my changes. Now I can take the steps to print these packets, to deliver these completed forms outbound. So I'm going to exit from form editor. Exit from form editor. We can create that form packet by printing selected forms to PDF, either all of them or the ones that we want to deliver. So we'll just print selected, click on the go arrow. Want to make sure you feel comfortable creating the form packet. First put it into a meaningful sort order. So maybe the first thing that we want to do is get that disclosure first. Use the green arrows. Move it up into the list. Exclusive right to sell contract up in the list. contract addendum for your protection, sure, property information. Let's just get rid of we don't need the spam. Maybe they can help us with it. Put it into a meaningful sort order, generate the PDF document. Because once I generate the PDF, I'll be able to email it, print it, take those appropriate steps. You're most likely going to print it. My sense is you're going to print this out, you're going to go meet with that client, kitchen table, to sit down, go through your listing presentation, and get that listing agreement and disclosure signed to move forward with that listing relationship. One of 18 pages. Print it to paper. It's an Adobe Acrobat Reader file at this point. Non-fillable Adobe Acrobat Reader. Print it to paper. Save it offline. Take the appropriate steps to deliver it to your client. Print, email, deliver. Or upgrade your account to DocBox and Task Management or Authentisign digital signatures. But that is for a whole nother webinar. So back to our transaction, clicking on the Home tab, going to re-raise this audio message. I do hope that this webinar was a benefit to you. Scrolling down, you can access our additional online content, youtube.com/InstanetWebinars, 1 to 5 minute how do I sessions, click by click, step by step, how to complete specific actions, 1 to 5 minutes. Transaction Desk, or in this case maybe InstanetForms.com/webinars, access to our upcoming schedule of live full-length 30 to 75-minute webinars, as well as access to our recorded content full-length 30 to 75-minute full-length webinar sessions. Tungle.me/webinar Greg if you want to schedule a free session for your team or office to be more interactive, discuss implementation strategies, and to make sure everyone is getting the highest and best use of their InstanetForms account. But with that said, I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to present, and until we webinar again, I hope that you have a tremendous, tremendous day.